In this presentation, we will take a look at some sales graphs within QuickBooks Online. We'll also be using Excel. We're going to export some data. We're going to take a look at some graphs that can be created from this data, common types of graphs that can be useful for presentational type purposes. Here we are in our test drive file for Craig's Design and Landscaping Services. We're going to go down to the reports down below. And we're going to be considering reports that are going to be part of the major, they're given more detail about our major financial statement reports, like always, like general. And then we're going to be opening up the major financial statement of the profit and loss first. So we'll open up the profit and loss. We're going to be changing the dates up top, dates being from 01/01/19 to 12/31/19. Then we'll run that report. Once run, we're going to duplicate the cells or the tab by right-clicking the tab up top, duplicating that tab. I'm then going to make this a little bit larger, and then I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to collapse the income number. We're going to be looking at reports. I'll collapse all of them here. We'll collapse the expenses as well. So we're going to be concentrating on the income line. So we might want more information. We've seen the reports last time with more information, which means we can break out this sales by customer or by product and item are the two common ways we might want to see this number. And of course, those two ways, then we may want to see graphs related to those items as well. So if we wanted to make a graph now, QuickBooks Desktop has a few more options just for the generation of the graphs within the system. But honestly, exporting the graphs to Excel might be easier anyways, because you really have a lot more functionality to do so, rather than having QuickBooks kind of generate one format of the graph, because even in the desktop version, there's not a whole lot of variations you can do. So how would you quickly make a graph on these type of items that could be useful using Excel? Let's go down to our reports again. I'm going to go back to the first tab. I'm going to scroll down to the reports, and then I'm going to scroll down to our sales information. So who owes you? We want to go to the sales and customers. And the two ways we typically break out the sales information, we got the sales by customer detail, sales by customer summary, and then we got the sales by product. So those are the two ways you would typically do it. I'm going to take a look at the sales by customer summary report. So we're going to pick up the summary report, and then I'm going to scroll back up top. I'm going to change the dates up top. So we're going to go back up top and change the dates from 01/01/19 to 12/31/19. Then we'll run that report. And here's a report that we saw in the past that's going to give us our information by customer, tying out, in essence, to the sales line. It's off by that $80, so you'd want to recognize that when making your graphs. And then we're going to go ahead and make our graph from it. So to do that, I'm going to export this to Excel. So I'm going to right-click. I'm going to export to Excel. And we will then create our Excel worksheet. So here is our Excel worksheet. I'm going to open that back up. Now, I'd like to include this in our other types of reports with all of our other information. So therefore, I'm gonna go back to our other Excel worksheet. I'm going to create a new tab for it. So we'll create a new tab here. Oh, did I make one? There it is. And I made two new tabs. I only want one new tab. And then I'm going to bring this information over. So I'm going to take this information, I'm going to highlight the entire sheet, right-click and copy. And then I'm going to bring that over into A1, right-click, and paste. So we'll paste that whole thing. I'm going to rename the sheet to Sale by Customer Graph. So it's going to be a graph item. This is going to be the data. Now what I'm going to do is then just customize this data so that I just have the data I want to need the graph for. So I don't really need the header in it. So what I'm going to do is a little Excel work here. I'll make this a little bit larger. I'm holding down control and scrolling up just like I would in QuickBooks to increase the screen to 130 at this case. I'm going to scroll up. I'm going to remove the first couple rows. I don't need them. So I'm going to put my cursor on number 1, left click, and drag down to 5. I'm going to do this fairly quickly, by the way, because this isn't an Excel class, but I want us to just see how you can kind of use Excel to add more detail. Might be impressive to people to have a little bit more detail. I'm going to right click on it and delete. Now, then notice we have a couple subtotals down here. I don't really want the subtotals in my graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this name. I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to remove the total subtotal information. I'm going to highlight these 3 cells that deal with the total. I just want the total. And before I do that, by the way, this is actually a formula. So I'm going to copy the whole row. I want to get rid of the formulas. I'm going to highlight the whole thing. Oh, I'm going to highlight the whole thing. Let's try that again. Right click and copy. And then to get rid of the formulas, I'm going to right click and paste it in the same spot, but 1, 2, 3 means values only. So then that means that these items down here are just values. So I don't have any formulas in the formula bar up top. They're just numbers. Then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to remove the detail, and I just want the total. So anything that has a subtotal, I don't want it. I'm going to delete that. That looks good. This one, same thing. I'm going to copy this. I just want the name, and I don't want the subtotal down here. I don't want the detail. So I'm going to right click and delete that. I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and there we have it. I don't need the total. I'm going to delete the total, but I can see that it totals up to, if I highlight the whole thing, that 10,280. So that looks okay. Then I'm just simply going to select all the data. I'm going to select this whole thing. And notice that at this point, sometimes it's easier to put like a table in place. So I'm going to select this whole thing. And then first I'll insert a table so that I could sort the data a little bit more easily. I'm going to go to Insert Tables and make a table. It'll highlight the whole thing and put a table around it. And what that does for you is it's easier to sort by column. So I could sort the data. Now, oftentimes you're going to want your data basically in ascending order, possibly. So maybe I want the top players up top. So I'm going to say I want it sorting from Z to A. So then I got the highest numbers up top. Then I'm going to highlight just the data I want, not the column up top, but just the data I want. And then this is how easy it is to make a graph once your data is there. You just go to Insert, and then I'm going to go to Charts, and I want basically a pie graph. I'm just going to pick the normal pie graph here. So that's going to be, we'll pick the first one. And there we have it. Then, of course, you have some variations on the pie graph that you could use. So you could select the drop down, and possibly you want, say, like, notice this one doesn't have any numbers in it, no percentages. So you could try to pick one with the percentages, but then you're saying, hey, it's too small, right? Now I've got the percentages, but there's too much data. So what I could do is I could delete the title, or you could put this, you don't really need a title. We might put that somewhere else, or it's in the tab down below. And now again, there's too much data. So you might want to say, hey, what if I don't need all of these. I just want the big guys. And then I want to have basically other to some degree, something to have other in it. So maybe you might highlight these and say, well, all of these, if I picked all of these, they add up to 158. And I know the total. If I take the total, it should add up to, if I was to sum up the whole thing, it adds up to that 10,280.05. So what if I took, basically all of these, those add up to 2,000. That's pretty high. What if I took all these? They add up to 1,581. In the top, that number, let's take it a little bit smaller. What if I add up all these? That's 1,047. Let's take that just for example. If I delete that 1,047.25, and I put in 1,047.25 here, and I'm going to label this other, right? So that's going to be other, and then this data is now gone, right? Those are gone. And then I can change the data here that's being picked up by going to the Chart Design tab, Data, and I selected the data here. And now I don't want all these empty cells that are now empty, so I'm going to move these cells up. Whoop, let's reselect the data, which is going to be this. And then we'll say OK. So there we have that. Now you can at least see the percentages here. And you could do some more adjusting in that format. So that's one quick way you can get a graph there. And then you could do what you want with this graph. You can make another page to this report and basically have the graph on another page on this report. So for example, you could take this graph and say, I want just the graph on basically its own page, its own sheet here, and put the graph over here. And then you can even go back to the prior page, right click and hide this whole page, right? You can hide that. Then when you print it, you're going to have this information. So if I went to the print and I wanted to print it as a PDF file, and then I wanted to print it as to the Qt PDF printer and the entire workbook, and I went down to the bottom here to the last page. You've got the last page. It's on 2 pages right now, but you don't have the prior page. The data page isn't there. You just be printing the graph. So then I'm gonna go back out. I'm gonna go to the page layout view, back over. Okay, and so now I can make it landscape too. I can to put it on 1 page, I can go to the orientation, make it landscape, and then I can basically fit it on 1 page here, landscape. So there we go. So that's one graph, one format you can use. Now also notice you might want to put it on PowerPoint. You have some options to put it on in PowerPoint. So for example, if you had a blank slide here, I just make a blank slide in PowerPoint, and I have this item behind it. Then I can say, all right, I'm just going to open PowerPoint, and I'm going to put it in there as a picture. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to the Screenshot and Images. I'll screenshot the whole thing. And then I'm just going to copy this whole thing. I'm just going to screenshot or cut it like that. And that should bring in the graph. And you can even do it more easily than that, really. I think you can just copy the whole graph. If I went back over here and just copied the graph, and right-click and copy it, and then I go back here, you probably want to paste it, however, not as the data, not like that, but as a picture. I'm going to paste it as a picture, and I'm not going to pull the data into here. I'm just pulling the picture in. And then once you have the picture, you can start to manipulate this. So you might say, hey, I'd really like, the numbers to be higher and the key to be in a different format. Maybe you want this key somewhere else. So for example, I might like copy this and paste it here, and I might say, I'd like to let's cut this. I'm going to say, let's see if I can, not that, if I can crop this. I'm going to crop this thing. So I just have the chart and like that, and then I need the key, so then I'll put this over here and I'll say, all right, and then I need the key, so maybe I'll crop this thing and make it into the key like that, and then I can copy that and I can put it over here, and then I can put it in a different order. Maybe I want this side by side. The key doesn't need to be as large possibly, and I want the graph to be larger. And then you might have a situation, and you can even break out the key. What if you say, I'd rather have the key. Maybe if I was to copy the key, and I'd rather have the first 2 rows up top. I'll crop this like that. And then the last row underneath, maybe we could crop this like that. And then you can have the key a little bit larger. So those are just some ideas you can work with on this. Now you could also have a situation where the design, if you were to say, the design of my slide is black, and now I've got these corners around it. You could also eliminate the background by going to the picture, going to remove background. I know I'm doing this quickly because it's not a PowerPoint class, but I'm going to remove background, and then you could just use this thing. I'm going to keep all the stuff in pink is going to be removed. So I'm going to try to keep this stuff. It's trying to remove part of my graph for some reason. Stop trying to remove part of my graph. Just the little corners, please. I'd like you to get rid of those. So that looks pretty good. And then if I click, and then if I say, okay, so there we have it now, right? And so now we got a black background, fairly decent, looking graph that we can have there. So that would be one sales graph that we can have. The other, and obviously the other sales graph that we would typically be working with, or let's just take this data and do something else with it. So if I was to unhide our tab here, I'm going to right click and unhide and say, okay, that's the one I want to see. And then if we then take our data and say, all right, I'd like to make another graph, on this. Let's make I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna insert, and let's make our standard kind of graph that looks like this, something like that. That's another typical graph that we might have, right? And I can do the same thing. I can copy this and put that over here on the graphs. And let's make this sales graph, sales graphs. And there's another kind of typical graph that that we can have. And again, if I wanted to bring this over to PowerPoint, be fairly straightforward. I could just copy it and bring that over to a new slide in PowerPoint and say, there's that one. And see, you probably want to paste it as a picture. So I'm gonna delete that. Delete. All right, and then I'm gonna paste it as a picture. So we have that, and that one's fairly straightforward. And then I can remove this second slide. So that's one main graph we would have for sales. The other main graph we would have for sales, if we go back to reports here and we scroll down through the reports, who owes you money, sales and customers, we would want the sales by product, service, and then probably the summary report here. And then you would export this report. You'd have to clean it up in a similar fashion. This one's a little bit more difficult. I'm not going to do the whole thing here, but just to give you the idea, 010119, 123119, and then we'll run that report. And I'm going to close the hamburger here. Now, this one looks a little bit more complicated, but if you scroll down, the only number we cared about, the only column is this amount column. So when you export it, then you would take that data and basically delete all of these rows. And you'd also have to basically think about what kind of subtotals you want on the side here. Do you want the detail of the fountains or not? And you have to basically account for the detail and remove the detail in there so that you don't have, duplicate numbers when you sum up and make the graph. In a similar fashion we did in the prior report. So I won't go through that in detail here. I'll just give you the idea of that graph. Again, it's not really an Excel or a PowerPoint course, but we want to just give you an idea how you can integrate that and take this information and display it in different ways.